People often ask, what's the tightest, smallest circuit I can have and run my trains on when they're building a model railway? And you'll hear lots of people saying, don't go for less than second or third radius Hornby track at the very least, and go for the biggest curves possible. But if you haven't got enough space, you can go much smaller than that. Here is a mock-up of a double track oval. The outer circuit is Hornby first radius curves, and the inner circuit, though not quite parallel for a reason you might see in a minute, is Jouef 12 3/4 inch radius curves. So let's see how a modern Hornby locomotive, the D16 440, copes with this track. And this is using just a very basic old Hornby controller. As I say, the Hornby controller is very basic, not feedback or anything like that, but the train is hardly slowing down as it goes round the first radius curves. And that's one of the very latest super detail models, came out about a year or so ago, and it has no problem with that whatsoever. So that was the D16. It's a 440 with a fairly short wheelbase. Next up is a J15, another Hornby model, super detail, came out a couple of years ago at the most, and it's an 060 tender engine, so it's got a longer fixed wheelbase, and if anything, it's going to struggle more with first radius curves. Let's see how it gets on. It slows down very slightly on the curve, but I've tried it with a feedback controller and it doesn't slow down at all. So it's really a case of, if you use the basic controller, yes, it will slow down very slightly. And now we see that the J15 has no problem pulling a coach or two round. It's only got one, but this just to prove the point. This is a Gresley suburban panelled coach, and I've tried it with two or three. I've just got one on at the moment, and yes, again, it slows down fractionally on the bends, but with a feedback controller, I say that's eliminated. So not only do these two locomotives run fine on first radius curves, they can also pull a proper train on those curves. Now here's another loco with a long fixed wheelbase. It's the J50. It's another 060, this time a tank engine. Let's see how it copes with first radius curves. Not a problem. Smooth as anything. Barely slows down at all. And this is not going at full speed, of course. I'm trying to go at sensible speeds where you could actually control your locomotive well, you know, if you were wanting to go for a scale speed. There we go, probably a scale 20 miles an hour or something like that. And it barely speeds up on the straight. I don't think it does at all. And there's a lovely, steady, slow movement, and that's, as again, with the basic Hornby controller. I'll bring it to a halt by the power supply. And now I really am pushing things. This is Hornby A3 Minoru. It's a 462 Pacific with an 8-wheel tender. I doubt this will be able to cope, but let's just see. I can hear some sliding and some grinding a bit, but it's managing all right. Speed it up a bit. Now I'm looking at the inner oval. Obviously it's far too close to the outer oval here. I've only done that because the power point gets in the way of the outer oval, but if I just spread it out a bit, it looks a little bit more sensible now. Anyway, as you'd expect, an 040 locomotive with a short wheelbase has no problem going round the inner oval, which is 12 3/4 inch radius. Jouef track dating from probably the early 1970s. And there goes a standard Hornby triangle, originally 040. More on the inner oval, 12 3/4 radius. And here is Toby the tram engine. This one's a Bachmann rather than Hornby, but it's no 60. It's got a very short wheelbase. Doesn't have a very high top speed anyway, but it's nicely geared and doesn't slow down one jot when it goes around these very tight bends. Just bring it to a stop. And here's a Bachmann 08. Again, a very slow, very short wheelbase and a very slow top speed for this locomotive anyway. A bit of a wobble as it goes around there, but I think that's more to do with the outside coupling rods than anything else. Again, no problem with such tight curves. Now, quite surprisingly, we've got Bachmann Class 20, so a locomotive that's got 2 bogies, and it has no problems with such a tight curve. In fact, it runs incredibly smoothly. It doesn't slow down one jot when going around the tight curves. Even the Hornby D16 tender locomotive can cope with 12 3/4 inch radius curves. It struggles very slightly on the curve, and I think it slows down a bit, but it's not noticeable unless you slow it right down, and it becomes a little bit jerky. Well, there we go, very jerky there. So let's see how it does here. Not bad, it's pretty good for a crawl for such a long wheelbase locomotive. Maybe the tender that's slowing it down rather than the locomotive. At higher speed, you don't notice it struggling at all. Oh, just a little bit over there in that corner, maybe.